Wondering how to crack the SAT's code and dramatically improve your score? In this video, I'm going to show you how you can do exactly that. But first, be sure to hit that subscribe button because it helps me out and it'll help you out as well as I release more SAT prep videos in the future. With all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. If you don't know me already, my name is Hayden Rhodea and I was able to improve by 410 points from my worst PSAT to my last SAT. My highest score on the SAT is 1590 and I was able to score perfectly on back-to-back SAT math and writing sections. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you, but you have to promise not to click away. The SAT is not as hard as you think it is. Now, before you click away, allow me to explain. Improving and scoring highly on the SAT is all about knowing how to best approach each different question type. Now, notice how I said question type and not just question. This is because while the numbers in a math question may change and the words in a reading section or writing section may differ from passage to passage, overall, the question types will remain the same from SAT to SAT. Moreover, the structure of the passages and the questions will remain the same. Understanding this is the key to cracking the SAT's code. Now, the SAT is not testing your intelligence. Instead, the SAT is testing your ability to recognize rules, patterns, and setups, all of which are completely teachable. Now, to illustrate this, let's take a look at some examples. All right, so the first setup that we're going to take a look at is what I call the stacked equation set. So if we take a look at this problem, we see that we've got equations stacked up above the wording of the question, okay? So what this is indicating to me is that I'm almost always going to be looking to add or subtract either my top equation or my bottom equation in order to get to my answer. And sometimes this means I will also have to multiply one of my equations or potentially both by some number. Okay, so now if we read through this question, it says, according to the system of equations above, what's the value of x? Okay, so we got to solve for x here. To do that, I want to get rid of y. So to get rid of y, what I'm going to do is multiply this top equation by 2. That way I can get 2y, and then I can subtract the other 2y. Okay, so I do that. I got to keep in mind I have to distribute this 2 to that x as well and the negative 9. So I do that, I will have 2y minus 2y. My y's are now gone. Notice how I got rid of y's because I want to solve for that x. Now I've got 2x minus x. So this is going ahead, and it's giving me x pretty much right away. Next, I've got 2 times negative 9. That'll give me negative 18. Then I do negative 18 minus negative 25. So that'll be negative 18 plus 25. And I see then that x will equal 7. So as you can see, by using that stacked equation setup, right, by recognizing it's stacked equations and using this trick, we're able to save a ton of time. Whereas if we didn't realize with stacked equations, we can multiply either our top equation or our bottom equation by a number and then add or subtract one or the other to get to our answer the fastest. We would have had to subtract x from each side. Okay, so we subtract x from each side. So now x is gone. Then we'd have negative 9 minus x. We'd have to plug that in for y. Okay, so then we'd have x plus 2 times negative 9 minus x equals negative 25. And then as you can see, we would have to go through and solve it that way. And that's going to end up taking way longer than if we use the method that I just showed you by recognizing that stacked equation setup. All right, let's take a look at a second example where recognizing a question type is going to save you a ton of time. So this is going to come from question 3 in this writing passage. So the question reads, which choice most effectively combines the underlined sentences? Okay, so this question right here, the type is combining sentences. Now what it's testing you on is your ability to write something that is grammatically correct and also avoid repetition and redundancy. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. So what we want to do with these questions is start with the answer choice that is the shortest. Now the reason why we want to start with the answer choice that is shortest when we're going to go through these is because that choice is the most likely to have no repetition and no redundancy. Okay, so if it fits with the paragraph, it's grammatically correct and has no repetition and redundancy, we can go ahead and pick it, right? And we don't have to waste time reading through those other 3, which are very lengthy and likely include repetition and redundancy, as I will show you as I go through this. So let's go ahead and run through D. It says, in addition to being unsightly and odorous, these algal blooms, okay, and now this right here, which I'm going to underline, is an introductory modifying clause. Now what it's modifying is algal blooms, which is correct, so we can go ahead and leave that, that's correct. And then we have these algal blooms cause oxygen depletion, which kills fish and other wildlife in the lakes, okay? And now what I just underlined there is referring to the oxygen depletion. It has to have that common grammatically. Therefore, answer choice D is grammatically correct, and that'll be our correct answer. Now let me show you why A through C are wrong and why this strategy makes sense. If we take a look at A, it says, in addition to being unsightly and odorous, these algal blooms cause oxygen depletion, and then we have the result being that it kills. Okay, the result being is very wordy. Okay, we want to avoid wordiness. We want to avoid wordiness, repetition, and redundancy when combining sentences, therefore A is incorrect. Option B, in addition to being unsightly and odorous, these algal blooms cause oxygen depletion. The algal blooms cause oxygen depletion. Right there, that's repetitive and it's redundant. So like I was talking about, with these combining sentences, they're really testing your ability to get rid of wordiness, repetition, and redundancy. Now, if we take a look at answer choice C, we have, in addition to being unsightly and odorous, these algal blooms cause oxygen depletion and oxygen depletion. So right there, we see it again, repetition and redundancy. We want to avoid repetition of the same words in one sentence. Therefore, we can get rid of C. Our answer is going to be D. So like I said, with these types of questions, you're going to want to start with that shortest answer if you're combining sentences. All right, let's take a look at another example on the SAT math section where understanding the best approach to a question type is very essential to being efficient. Okay, so if we take a look at this question, it says, which of the following expressions is equivalent to x squared minus 2x minus 5 over x minus 3? Now, a lot of people would just go ahead and they would write this all out and they would do that whole division problem. Now, the reason that you don't want to do that here is it's going to take more time than is necessary to answer this question. Now, you're probably thinking that has to be the only way to answer this. It's not. You can use what's called the remainder theorem. Now, the remainder theorem says that if we have a division problem like this with a polynomial up top, okay, in this case, our polynomial is x squared minus 2x minus 5, and we are dividing by something like x minus 3 here, we can take this 3, we can plug it into this polynomial up here, and that's going to give us our remainder. Now, the reason that I can do this for this question is because all of my remainders in A through D are different. Okay, if my remainders were the same in two of those answers, then I would have to go through and do division. But because I recognize all those remainders are different, I can use the remainder theorem. And that's going to help me solve this way quicker. All I got to do is plug in 3, so that's going to give me 3 squared minus 2 times 3, and then minus 5, and that's going to end up giving me negative 2. So my answer there is going to be D. Okay, notice how recognizing that saves a ton of time versus writing out that whole problem. Because if you were to write out all of this as a division problem, that's going to be even more writing than I did right there. Okay, and that's even before you have to go through and solve all of it. Okay, so as you can see, understanding these setups, tricks, patterns to the SAT for the math section, writing section, and reading section is super important. All right, let's take a look at another example from the writing section where having the right strategy is going to help you be crazy efficient on the SAT. So when you take a look at this writing passage, we see this paragraph starts with a 1. Whenever I see that, that's telling me I want to go find the question where I'm placing a sentence first. And the reason why you want to do that is because if you were to just go ahead and go through and not read that sentence you have to place, you have to go all the way back and read through that entire paragraph once again to find where you have to place that sentence. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to go down to 22 because I see that's where we're placing a sentence. Okay, so we've got to make this paragraph most logical, sentence 5 should be placed where. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go through and read sentence 5 and determine what should come before it and then what should also come after it. Okay, now keep in mind, if it's something where it's going to be placed at the beginning of a paragraph, then what you find for what comes before it may not be there, but what comes after it will. Okay, so that's why we do for both before and after that sentence. So let's go ahead and read through it. We have Berland advocated using, and keep in mind that the answer there is going to be no change, and that's another thing here, is we want to answer these questions as we see them, because otherwise we're going to be rereading, and that's wasting time for the SAT writing section. So my answer for 21 is going to be A, okay? Options B and options C, they are not idiomatic. If we look at option D, we had advocating to use soil extraction. There's no real subject there, okay? Advocating to use soil extraction to do what? Okay, we see that that's not going to be an independent clause, and because that's not an independent clause, D has to be incorrect, okay? Now, let's go ahead and read through it. So we have Berland advocated using soil extraction, removing small amounts of soil from under the tower's north side opposite its tilt to enable gravity to straighten the tower. Okay, so afterwards I would want to be talking about some sort of straightening of the tower, right? Or some sort of him using the method. Okay, so straightening the tower by using that soil extraction. That's what I'd be looking for to come after. Now, what should come before? That would be an introduction of John Berland. Okay, he's the subject of this independent clause. We're talking about him advocating using that soil extraction. So we would want to talk about Berland, who he is, kind of what background he has. So let's go ahead and take a look through our paragraph. So we have enter committee member John Berland. Okay, so we're introducing him. And then we have comma, he is a geotechnological engineer. Now the reason that we don't want to have he is here is because we just stated the subject, John Berland. Stating here, we don't need to do. We can just delete that whole underlined portion and say a geotechnical engineer from England who saved London's clock tower, Big Ben, from collapse. Okay, we know that that's referring to John Berland, who it's coming after, and we have that comma after Berland. Okay, we don't want to say Berland again, and we don't want to say his again. That's repeating that subject. We don't want to repeat the subject because, like I said earlier, we want to avoid repetition and redundancy. Now let's go ahead and keep reading. We've got Berland began a years-long process of drilling out small amounts of soil. Now notice how that is coming in after what I said in sentence 5, right? In sentence 5, I said what I want to come after is them talking about straightening the tower using that process of soil extraction. That's what we're talking about there. Okay, we're talking about the beginning of using soil extraction and drilling out those small amounts of soil. So now we're doing what I said should come after sentence 5. Therefore, we want to place this sentence after sentence 1, okay? We know that it has what should come before it in an introduction of John Berland, and it's got what should come after it in sentence 2. Therefore, it should be placed after sentence 1. Now, while we're at it, we'll go ahead and answer 20 as well. So as we read through, we've got Berland began a years-long process of drilling out small amounts of soil from under the tower. And then we see here that took several years to complete. Well, once again, what did we say earlier? We said a years-long process. Okay, so if we say that took several years to complete, we are being repetitive and redundant. So that's another example of where we want to avoid repetition and redundancy at all costs. And we see options B and option C. They both talk about taking several years, which is repetitive and redundant. So our answer there is going to be D. All right, so I've got 2 more examples for you. So let's go ahead and take a look at one from the SAT math section. So this is question 3. Now, most people, when they see this question, will just do what pretty much everyone does, right? They'll start reading through the problem, and then they'll get here. Now, here's why that is inefficient. If you ever see on the SAT that you've got one variable, right, in this case it's P, set equal to a bunch of other variables, in this case it's M, it's E, and it's O, and you also see that you've just got an equation like this, you already know basically that you're going to have to give that letter, in this case P, that variable, in terms of the others. So there's no need to read any of this paragraph. So if I'm ever going through the SAT and I see in my answer choices, and keep in mind, I'm always going to take a quick glance at the answer choices before I start going through the question, just because sometimes it'll give me something like this, especially if I ever see that I've got some sort of equation with multiple variables set up like that. That's usually going to be a situation where I have to rearrange them in one of the questions. In this case, it's 3. Okay, so I would see this. I wouldn't read any of this. Okay, so I can just go ahead and get rid of that. Immediately what I'm doing is I'm just skipping down, seeing, okay, I got to find what P is equal to. All right, that's going to be really easy. All I got to do is multiply each side by 6. Okay, now I got 6E, then I just got to subtract O from each side, gets rid of that, subtract 4M from each side, get rid of that. Okay, so I'm going to end up with 6E minus O and minus 4M. As we can see that that's going to be answer choice A. We got 6E minus O and minus 4M. All right, I've got one last example for the SAT writing section that's going to show you how important identifying question types is when you're trying to be as efficient as possible on the SAT. So let's take a look at question number 30. So we'll read through the sentence. We have, moreover, the training period for PAs is markedly shorter than, and then I've got those 4 underlined, physicians. Now, immediately, I know that this is a question that's testing my ability to compare 2 things to each other. How do I know that? Well, for one, an indicator to me is the fact that I've got those 4. I've also got that compared with and that 4. Okay, another thing in the sentence, we already know we're comparing 2 things just from what we read. Now, when we're comparing 2 things, what the SAT is testing our ability on is to make sure we are comparing the same 2 things, and then also that we are maintaining the same number, right? We're getting the right number. So let's go ahead and talk about how we would solve this one. So we have the training period for RAs now, for PAs. Now, for PAs is a prepositional phrase, so we're going to ignore for PAs when determining the number, okay? So we're comparing the training period. We're not comparing the PAs, right? We're comparing the training period. Training period is singular, all right? So I know already I'm not going to use the word those, okay? Because those would be for if it was comparing 2 things that were plural. All right, so we can go ahead and get rid of option A. And then if we take a look at answer choice B, which says that compared with, we know that's going to be wrong as well because it would be being repetitive and redundant. We already said that the training period for PAs is markedly shorter. Saying that something's markedly shorter than something else is already comparing the 2, so we don't have to use the word compared there. So we can go ahead and get rid of B. We can't delete the underlined portion because then we would just have, moreover, the training period for PAs is markedly shorter than for than physicians. In that case, we'd be comparing physicians to a training period. Okay, we can't compare physicians to a training period. We need to compare the training period for PAs to the training period for physicians. Therefore, our answer's got to be C. So as you can see right there, being able to identify what the question is testing you on is what's going to make that question so much easier. All right, so now that you've learned the importance of being able to recognize question types, patterns, rules, and setups on the SAT, let's talk about how you can improve your score dramatically by learning all of these, not just the few I showed in these examples. Now, I want to preface what I'm about to say by telling you that the way that I'm going to recommend that you learn all of these question types, patterns, rules, and setups on the SAT is slightly different than the way that I learned them. But the way that I'm going to recommend to you is going to be way more efficient, and it's going to take way less time to learn all of these than it took me. This is because the way that I learned all of these patterns, rules, setups, and question types on the SAT was by analyzing tons of SATs that were released previously and also SAT practice tests. This is because I couldn't afford private SAT tutoring or prep books, and in addition to that, there was not very much quality SAT tutoring available online. So this meant that I really had to take a lot of time to go through and figure out the test. I had to crack the SAT's code by myself. Now, the good news for you is that you're not going to have to do this by yourself. I've spent well over 1,000 hours studying the SAT to figure out question types, patterns, rules, and setups so that I can teach them to you and be the person who I needed during my SAT prep process. This means I'm going to teach you exactly what I look for on the SAT, including all of the keys to cracking the SAT's code. So if that's something you're interested in, or you're just thankful that I'm doing this for people, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Like I said, it's completely free. Now let's discuss a little bit more in depth one of the largest elements in cracking the SAT's code, and that's efficiency. Efficiency is everything. If you're able to solve the easy questions efficiently, it makes those harder problems way easier because you can have so much more time to solve them. By knowing the best approach for every SAT question type, it's going to relieve so much of the pressure and anxiety that you might feel on test day, and it's overall just going to help you perform so much better. And best of all, when you take the SAT, you're going to feel powerful. And that's something that a lot of people don't get to feel when they take standardized tests. And I think that that's really special. So overall, if you want to crack the SAT's code and drastically improve your score, then you're going to want to make sure that you understand all of the question types, patterns, rules, and setups on the SAT, because they're going to allow you to be extremely efficient. Now, like I alluded to earlier, I have completely free SAT prep available on my channel, taught by me, designed to teach you everything that you need to know for the SAT. I have free 14 and 90-day SAT prep courses available. I also have answer explanations for SAT practice tests. I have tips and tricks playlists, compilation videos of math problems of different difficulties, and I have reading videos arranged in a compilation by passage type, be it science, be it literature, history, social science. And in addition to that, I'll be creating new SAT prep content throughout the rest of the year, as well as revamping some of my old content now that I've greatly improved the production quality of my videos by spending over $1,000 on improved video and audio recording equipment. So that being said, please subscribe, like, and share if my videos are helpful. And if you're gaining value from my content, please consider donating to me. It helps keep my videos free, and it also supports me personally. If you're looking for private SAT prep, college essay editing, college admissions consulting, then please check out my website. The link is in the description. And with all that being said, I will catch you in the next one.